Hello, everyone. How are we all doing? Come on in, sit on down. It's time for another episode of the Truther Therapy Sessions. What are we on now? 87. My, how the time flies. We're going to get to that 100 very soon. I can feel it. I can taste it. We're on our way. And, as usual, sometimes it's just me rambling away for 2 hours about something that's just on my mind. But every now and then, I'm blessed with a guest who actually wants to come and join me and spend 2 hours just ranting and raving about what it is to actually be awake. And today's guest probably needs no introduction. I think we share a lot of the same audience, to be honest. Over the year I've been back on YouTube, a couple of years, I've kind of built a small relationship with this guy, and I'm quite happy. I think I can call him a friend now. I think we have a good rapport going, and I was on his channel not too long ago talking about the clowns and just reminiscing about general weird conspiracy stuff on his channel. And I think it's about time I get him on my channel, and we do what we do on here, and we have a retrospective, introspective conversation about what it is to be a truther, and especially a content creator as well. So Jay Dreamers, are you there? Can you hear me?
Aloha.
There. Fantastic. There we go. In the chat, guys, let me know if one of us is wildly louder than the other, because I am winging it. I can only...
I came in hot just now.
No, it's all right. I think we're peaking at the same level. Someone usually tells me if something's wrong, and if anything does go wrong, you know what I'm like? I get distracted. Send me loads of messages on Telegram, and hopefully I'll see something on my phone telling me, Paul, the sound went out 20 minutes ago. We can't see anything. You froze. Just let me know, guys. I'm counting on the chat. We have a wonderful community here, and I've got some regular faces in there, as I can see already. We've got Danielle, we've got Phil, we've got Amelia, we've got Joshua, we've got Elasa, we've got everyone. Everyone's here. Everyone's turned out. It's wonderful. I think it's going to be a good show. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I'm excited. I can relate too, because I've done whole live streams where I was muted and I had to redo the whole thing.
I've done that
same
too.
Gusto.
That's it comes with the territory, doesn't it? I've done it far too many times, and I should, as a professional, I should know better. But nope, it keeps happening, and like I said, I don't want that to happen today, because I'm looking forward to this conversation. Because I don't get nervous anymore, really, for any show, but I had a little bit of a feeling today before this one, like a bit of excitement, butterflies, we'll call it, a bit of excitement, because it's kind of like, I've been listening to this guy for years, like a long time. I've been following your work. Like, I don't know. How long have you been on YouTube for? Because I feel like I've been there since the very beginning with you, to be honest. I mean, what's the year, roughly?
10 years.
10 years, yeah, about the same time I started, 2014, roughly. And I swear I was following you then, talking about the plasma apocalypse, the red and the blue, the Phantazoids and all that. I just had it all there, in my mind. And every now and then I'd dip in and out of your channel, and I kind of absorb your whole ethos, your whole theory, the whole thing you've got going on. And it's always just been there as like an inspiration in my life as a conspiracy theorist in the back of my mind, as this overarching kind of like possibility of the realm we're actually in. And it's inspirational, and I've always liked your attitude. And now I'm at this point where it's like, I can just ask the guy to come on my channel, and I can just talk with this person who I feel like I've known my entire life. It's kind of, here he is. And yeah, so in a way, thank you, and thanks for doing this. And it makes me realize it's a very small conspiracy world when you actually get into it. Like we're all kind of connected in some strange way. And when I saw you dipping out of my own chats, I was like, no way, he watches my videos. Like, this it's one of those things. So that's enough me blushing away, and I think I've done enough of that. So as an introduction to my audience, and I don't think many people are new to you, like I explained earlier, I think, again, you're quite a known entity in the conspiracy world. But for those who don't know, do you want to explain what your channel is and what it is you actually do there, and how long you've been doing it for, and maybe give like a brief elevator pitch introduction to like your body of work as it is? I'll give it to you.
Kind of a backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So over on my channel, I pretty much share my path, which includes, elements of my feelings, my thoughts, my intuition on different things, but also my studies, mainly my studies. And I really started my channel because I was going to have a baby, and a little baby boy, and I really wanted to share my research with him, for when he was older, so that he had access to his dad's you know, research and path and thoughts on things and stuff that I feel is very valuable and important. All the most valuable, important things I wanted to just give straight to him. However, when I started thinking about it, I realized this was going to be a library of information. That's a lot of time. You know, I had a job and stuff. I don't have a lot of time to do that. And someone just recommended, why don't you just s present it and get a YouTube channel and just record it? And I'm like, I mean, will they save that forever? Like, will it just always be there? They're like, yeah, you know, it's like a little video library and they just save all your stuff for free. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So you know, I sat down, made my first little homemade video using this cheap tablet that I had or whatever. And my first video was breaking down the symbolism of the Colorado State Seal because I was very interested in hieroglyphics and ancient glyphs and ancient writings that go back to picture form. And I saw a message in the state seal, and that message exactly correlated with the message that was given by the fallen angels in, I think, chapter 3 of the book of Enoch,
Mm.
where they had all come together and made a pact to stand essentially against the rules that they had been breaking and risk, you know, life and limb to mate with the women of Earth, essentially. And so I made this little quick, you know, 15-minute presentation as I was allowed at the time. And I wasn't really nervous or anything at first because I didn't think anyone else would watch. I just thought I was recording this for posterity for my son. And then
Mm.
I started realizing people were commenting and people were like subscribing and stuff. And you know, after a couple more years of doing it, then I started to realize, wow, I'm not just doing this for myself or my son. I'm literally like others are benefiting from this, which is awesome. And it allowed me an avenue to vent because I didn't, you know, it was difficult to speak about these types of things with regular friends or whatever, you know,
Mm.
um, which I didn't have many of anyway because this is how I am. These are things I'm interested in. This
Yeah,
this is, you know, like these are my topics of discussion and everything else is kind of boring to me. Um,
I understand.
but then I was able to like kind of make friends at first when YouTube was in its early stages and you know nobody really like I wasn't popular or had a popular channel or anything. And I was you know other content creators would respond to my videos in video form and we were kind of like talking back and forth with one another and I kind of came in as far as like a fringe truth seeking channel on probably the second wave. Probably you and I both came in on like sort of a second wave after like, you know, the first fringe conspiracy theorist type people really got in here first and then kind of blazed that trail.
Yeah,
And then people like us realized, oh, we can do that too, you know, and contributed our own flavors and our own paths or whatever. But yeah, so on my channel, I just like to talk about things that are outside the box, and it can be kind of diverse. It could be kind of spread out, but I'd say the areas of focus, the main area of focus, all of my research and all of my study has culminated into essentially eschatology, which traditionally is the study of the end of things or the end of the world. You know, the end of the world as we know it,
hmm,
but also the very beginning, which leads me back into the creation cycle, which I initially was very interested in at first. There is a train going by. I hope that's not too loud.
no, no.
Okay. But I loved that because eschatology got my heart beating, you know, and it made me feel there was purpose all of a sudden. There was something going on and there's meaning to my studies in especially biblical studies. Like it filled in so many so many mysterious parts of the Bible especially whenever it tied back in cyclically to the very beginning and the book of Genesis. And, you know, it really lit a fire under me and refueled my passion to re-examine and restudy the things that I was always passionate about, especially, you know, biblical things and, you know, things that I had always wondered about and eventually, you know, went out and studied on my own. But I really focus on eschatology. I believe that these are the quote unquote end times. I believe that we're headed towards a huge shift, you know, and there's different perspectives out there on how they label that shift and how they perceive it or whatever. But all in all, I think all of us who have those feelings can agree there's something coming. There's something on the way. And and that also carries with it its own implications, that something has already come in the past and
Hmm.
these things are happening, and the people are caught unaware. They forget time and time again. They become lazy, or something happens in this world, and I'm, people watching on a worldwide scale, and including doing my own self-diagnostics, all of the time, to make sure I'm not sleeping, to make sure I'm awake, and that um to not be distracted, really. That's been a huge part of my path, is learning all of the different distractions and being able to find balance between enjoying this life and the things that are in this world without being of the world, and conforming to all of the strangeness and changes and downright evil, satanic, morbid, weird things that I've seen happening to the people
Mm.
that I love and care about so deeply in the world. So
Yeah.
anyways, I study eschatology. That for me, that's the conspiracy theory, if you want to call it that, that connects everything. It's a grand unified topic that touches all of the other topics. They're all related to the very beginning and to the very end, as some of us see it. So I'll talk about, the truth that I see in the movies decoded. It's related to, things like the Illuminati, going back to different families and tribes of nomads, Tartaria, the barbarians, different families and stuff. Um, the Garden of Eden, especially, that's what my second book really focused on, was the Garden of Eden, or Hyperborea, goes by different names in different cultures.
Hmm.
And what that place looks like, and the reality of that place, as opposed to just being some far away, fairy tale or something. That this is a place of substance, and that it existed, and that it has existed over time. And then I started noticing that, it seems to me, I found, evidence after evidence that the elite know and believe these things. And they don't pass them off as fairy tales, except for whenever, they condition us to police one another intellectually or emotionally, and we convince ourselves that these places don't exist, when in reality I see nothing but evidence that the world leaders know of it, and have been looking for the fountain of youth, have been looking for paradise lost, that have been, trying to find this quintessential homeland of the earth, or whatnot. And anyways, it's been a long journey, and my mind is just in so many directions. It's hard for me to really just focus on one thing at a time or whatever, but it all wraps up nicely within what I call the plasma apocalypse.
My mic was muted. I'm back. Here we go. Right. No, that was a great summary. For explaining all of that. I like the thing that set you off from all of this was wanting to create an archive for your son. I think that's a beautiful thing. I like that idea. I think that was really nice. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. And like I said, I understand, like, you kind of started watching my videos and commenting a bit more when we started discussing eschatology on my channel as well. And it is one of those topics where, like, your research in all things conspiracy eventually leads to this: what's going on, what's going to happen in the end. We need to kind of understand, and to do that, you have to kind of look back. It does end up going backwards. Like, well, what did they say? What did they know? What was going on then? And I think your plasma apocalypse type of description of how it went and how it will go can fit quite well with the millennial reign idea and the return of Christ and this type. And it does seem to be, there's parallels there which are definitely worth exploring, which I think you have been exploring on your own channel. Am I right in
Mhm.
thinking that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I love this. I like to call it the season of Satan, because it spells SOS, because we need help, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
But man, that's I study the omens, and I look for the omens of the apocalypse. There's always omens. And that's the thing that Jesus himself, when he was walking with the disciples, first question, as always, when's this gonna happen? Like,
Hmm.
that's the first question I'm asked all the time. And instead of I was hesitant to answer that question, because people are asking me as if I know when the apocalypse is coming. And, I'm honored that people might think that. However, I revert back to the teacher who didn't come out to his disciples and say, well, on the 15th of such and such a month in the year of whatever,
Hmm.
you don't have to worry about it till then. No, he said, listen to the signs, watch the signs, just like the fig tree. Like, be prepared always, or you're going to be caught up unaware. You're going to be, it's going to come like a thief in the night. He didn't say anything like, yeah, I know exactly when it's going to come. I'm the son of God. I'm glad you asked, make sure to
Hmm.
like and subscribe. No, like, he told
Yeah.
people to be wise and taught them to think for themselves and to be discerning. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I love that. And I think that's the best answer when it comes to that particular topic anyway.
Absolutely. So the plasma apocalypse idea. Did you want to give a overview and maybe because I think you probably said this 1,000 times on your channel, and I'm sure because I've done it myself with the Nephilim clown stuff, you must have distilled it down into some kind of like easy to explain, quick 15-minute elevator pitch type scenario. Do you think you can maybe give that pitch for us now, just to kind of
Yeah.
give people that
Yeah, just
idea?
hit the highlights.
Sure, I'll give it to you, and you just give us your ideas. Go.
No problem. So I like to study etymology and the origins and roots of words, tracing all the way back to individual glyphs and then combinations of glyphs that give us context for a message. And in studying the word apocalypse, I've come to mean that it's far more than simply a personal revealing and have become enlightened on the inside or whatever, but it literally applies to the physical world as well, where there is an uncovering of our world. Our world is covered by the firmament and a dome. That's my perspective on it. And I also believe that the ancients completely agree with that, and that's their cosmology, not mine. And I'm just going with my ancient ancestors and the way that the majority of the world saw our world across time. If we take a vote from across time and everyone raised their hand, including all the dead people who've ever existed, they're the people who believe in a firmament or a dome, they win. Like this modern concept of cosmology and space and stuff is relatively comparatively tiny and insignificant in comparison to what the majority belief has been across time. Now I know people are going to argue against that, but anyways, the apocalypse is when the dome is removed or broken open, essentially. The dome opens up. And because our world is pressurized and we have pressure systems, weather that's created by that pressure that's continually building over time, and that pressure comes in the form of physical objects, but mostly gases. The earth creates gases and it breathes and it creates zephyrs from the inner earth, and these gases come out, as well as the ocean itself constantly releasing gases, and all of the life and death cycle that creates gases, and all of these gases um, put that pressure into our world, which is why our weather increases over time. That during the paradise, they didn't have changing weather and seasons and things like how we have today. Um, but whenever the dome breaks open, there's a pressure release, and the atmosphere depressurizes, and that tips over all kinds of other dominoes, which leads to a change in buoyancy, or as most people would perceive the opposite of that as being gravity. It changes the how much things weigh. It changes the density of objects that are in up here on the surface. Makes things lighter.
Hmm.
Things float up into the sky for a short period of time until this pressure change reaches equilibrium, and then things can float back down, which is what allows for making the connection or building a bridge to animals, according to Native Americans, aliens, the Anunnaki, etc., fallen angels, that they're falling down, that they're not reaching um, terminal velocity and smashing into the earth or whatever, but they're just floating on down during this pressure release when the time has come where God has opened the sky and opened the gate and allowed for coming and going into this world.
Hmm.
And these creatures can safely just come on down into this world. And that took me right back to my beginnings and studying Genesis 6 and the giants and the Nephilim and the Watchers and where they came from, and how they came here and how they got here. And that started opening my mind to all these different possibilities. But in addition to the pressure release, there's also the main part of it, which is the plasma.
Hmm.
And, it's the plasma apocalypse. So there's got to be a lot of plasma involvement. And there is. And what really got me thinking about the plasma was probably about 12 years ago, I'd say. I watched a documentary called Symbols of an Alien Sky
Oh
by
yeah.
David Talbot. And that just tore my mind right open as to brand new possibilities of rethinking about the ancient world and glyphs and events that had happened and stuff. And they were really focused in this documentary on plasma discharges that may have come from space or other planets, or they were doing their best to put these puzzle pieces together. And I recognized the truth there. And I started researching, plasma physics and the electric universe, and coming up with really my own questions, and which led to my own theories on plasma's involvement here in our world. And then I started to see the connections throughout history, that there was these different periods whenever it seems like our atmosphere was electrically amplified. And this helps to account for so many of these myths that I see using comparative mythology. I see the same similarities from myths to myths, and I started putting them together scientifically, balancing out science with speculation and science fiction and fantasy and all these things. Then I started to see that there's truth there, that there's really no line between what we consider to be fantasy and what we consider to be modern accepted fact or whatever. It's just that people have lived in this age, and that's all we really know. We just look at the ground around us instead of having a heightened perspective in order to see off into the distance of the far past, which would help us and give us insight into our far future. So I started studying plasma physics, and then I came across a website called the Saturn Death Cult. And that was really mind expanding too, because the person who made that website put forth this theory that the planet Saturn was once much closer, and that there was this purple dawn, and that at the beginning everything was purple and foggy. And then there was a connection that was made for me to this vapor canopy that I had heard, different Christians referring to, as far as
Hmm.
the world being enveloped in vapor. And then I wanted to find out how could that happen? How could there be vapor everywhere? Where's this vapor coming from? You know?
Hmm.
And then it fit perfectly in with my atmospheric depressurization theory, because whenever you have depressurization or rapid depressurization, one of the first things that you get is vapor. It literally creates, like, if you're in an airplane and the cabin depressurizes, it will create clouds inside of the airplane. And everything was just kind of fitting together. Um, but I started studying the flat Earth theory, and because I was kind of done with the hollow Earth theory. I really just researched the heck out of that, and I wanted something new. And I came across the flat Earth theory, which was really popular about, I don't know, 8 years ago or so.
Something
Like,
like that.
really
Yeah.
kicked in. And I was not a flat earther, and I didn't really have that cosmology at the time, but I wanted to look into it and see what people could possibly even be saying to support this idea. And as I did, as most people have already, part of their own testimonies, it becomes compelling. And so I'm looking into it and I'm studying it. And because I started to believe in the dome, and I started to believe in the firmament. I had to reconcile, and I had to make sense of this contradiction that seemed to exist between all of these theories from the electric universe and Zecharia Sitchin and Immanuel Velikovsky and all these people that believed in, like, outer space, and like thunderbolts were coming from outer space, or the planets were getting too close and stuff. That can't happen within this cosmology.
Hmm.
So then I had to put the pieces together myself and think outside of the box to reconcile the truth that I did feel and sense within these other authors and presenters, and my own logical perspective of we live in a closed system, and there are, when we look up at the heavens, we're seeing the underside of the roof of the world, and that the planets and the stars and everything are underneath that roof. um so back to the plasma. I started researching our world, and within academics, they present these different layers of the atmosphere. That there's the mesosphere and the troposphere and the stratosphere and all these different spheres or whatever that wrap around us in these little chakra-like shells,
Hmm.
of the Earth. And one of them is the plasmasphere. And I'm like, wow, we're enveloped in plasma. Why isn't this talked about? What is this? So I started learning about this plasma, and it helped me to understand where the lights of the heavens come from. And that helped to reconcile why is it dark when I look up at the sky? If you ask someone where heaven is, they'll point up. You know what I mean? Like that's generally where heaven is. It's up. Just a child would point to the sky. They're not going to point down. Oh, it's everywhere. It's because we're on a spinning, wobbling ball flying through space. So that's heaven's out there or in another dimension. I can't point anywhere. But oftentimes people will point up to the heavens, right?
Hmm.
And the heavens are bright and they are colorful according to tradition, right? There's no dark void and just, how we look up and see the dark sky. So knowing that there's plasma wrapped around the world, at least from the eyes of academics, helps me to understand where the lights that we do have, the luminaries, where they come from and how they possibly could be made with that light pouring through the firmament, which means that the firmament in that case would have to be translucent or allow a substance that allows light to pass through it, but not physical objects like glass or, you know what I mean,
Hmm.
ice or something like that. I lean towards ice. Um, but anyways, it's all this plasma, and then I had to figure out, well, what is that plasma made of? What is plasma? I don't want to just throw words out haphazardly and randomly. I want to know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. So then I started studying the different types of plasma and what is plasma? What is it made out of? It's essentially just a gas that's become electrified or ionized and activated. So I needed to know what kind of gas that is, which is hydrogen for the most part. And
Hmm.
hydrogen is just wrapped around. So then I figure out, well, what color is hydrogen whenever it becomes plasma? It's like a magenta, red, pink color in essence. And then I was like, well, that's interesting because the dragons of old are these fire dragons or fire worms that were flying through the heavens during medieval times or the Dark Ages and before. And people described what sounds like plasma or these worms that were undulating throughout the sky. And when they touched the ground, they started fires or, had magical abilities to petrify people or, could do things that were like magic to us because we didn't understand or we don't in the modern world, plasma physics and advanced, studies, areas of research and studies. So anyways, that was the plasma from above, okay, which is allowed to enter into this world once the firmament does open.
Hmm.
But then I took it a step further because I saw that there was evidence for another kind of plasma or light that comes up and is generated from the earth, and I call that a geoplasma. And a geoplasma is the same thing. It's just gases that are within the Earth that become ionized during this depressurization event as they rush through these cavernous systems and cracks and caves and stuff of the Earth. And they're rushing through and they become ionized. The gases do, or the zephyrs, or the inner Earth breath or wind. And when they blow out of the surface, they create these pillars and these rods and beams and columns and staffs and reeds and all the different ways they've been described throughout antiquity of light. And that they take these shapes because they're plasma and they can undulate and move about within the atmosphere and the winds and things like that. But they're stuck in those positions. They don't move about like the space plasma. It can come in and move about and walk around or whatever. But the Earth plasma is grounded. It comes out of this particular place, and if it can't leave that place, or it'll lose its source, which is the gases or whatever. So then I started studying the plasma that comes out of the Earth, and then made the connections to the fountain of youth, the actual physical fountain of youth, which is Earth energy, invigorating ionized oxygen that stimulates cellular regeneration and basically allows for extended lifespans and healing and detoxing, sanitizing, and also the effects that it has on the synapses within the brain and amplifies our thinking. And then that leads into the reality of a Garden of Eden where the animals could communicate with the people through telepathy because of the amplified electrical field in the atmosphere, and therefore their own amplified spirits that are much stronger and can reach out and envelop the body, and they can share thoughts and feelings and things instantly with one another, which is
Mm.
why we don't need technology and a middleman like that during those times. Um, Anyways, I'm sorry. I'm kind of rambling, but the plasma
No, no.
apocalypse in short is when the sky opens up because the pressure needs to be released. The pressure gets released, things become lightweight, the world becomes a vapor canopy. Um, Plasmas enter into this world from the heavens. Plasmas erupt every other cycle. Right now, those plasmas are retracted because it goes through a back and forth of charging and release. So we're during a period of charging. So all of the energy that gives us life and spirit and things like that is draining down into the heart of the earth, charging. So one day it'll be released. The plasmas enter into this world. It becomes a time of magic. It becomes a time of what we now consider fantasy and fiction, and a time whenever there's otherworldly creatures, because those barriers, which are electromagnetic in nature, and then followed by a physical barrier, those barriers are they go down during this neutral point because whenever you have a electromagnetic shift, which is what causes the pressure to release, when you have an electromagnetic shift in the Earth, then the electromagnetic barrier or the magnetic shield or force field that surrounds the Earth above and below, they disappear entirely, which allows for insects and animals and humanoids and seeds and plants and all kinds of stuff to traverse from the inner Earth or the hollow Earth up into our world to the surface. And those on the surface up through the opening in the heavens above to the the planes beyond or the realms beyond or whatever and become what I call fractalverse travelers. And it also inversely allows other travelers who, with the right technology or whatever, to come into this world. And they kind of bounce around from place to place, which is why I started, paying attention whenever you were talking about the Nephilim clown theory because it completely aligned with my theories that I was thinking about as far as what these beings look like. Not just the humanoid ones, but also, like I said, there's animals. According to Native American tradition, they say the animals came from the heavens, from the sky. And there's all kinds of examples of animals descending from heaven, including in the Bible, obviously in the book of Revelation when Jesus returns on a white horse. But there's heavenly animals, creatures outside of the dome or whatever. And every time I found that they were white or albino or even an off-white, like a pale sort of, and this is how a lot of alien creatures are starting to be portrayed in the media and in movies and things. They're just like a slimy, shiny, grayish white sort of color, or sometimes just pure white, albino or whatever,
Hmm.
which you're very familiar with. Um, and then this concept helped me to understand where it is that they landed because of the cosmology that I was looking at and made sense to me they would land at the middle of the earth because the opening is in the middle at the apex of the dome. And so that stands to reason they would just go straight down. That's the quickest way to land is to just land straight down, right?
Hmm.
And they would land straight down in the heavenly city, in the heart of the earth, in the heart of the world, and that became a gathering place and a place of safety during certain apocalyptic cycles whenever the people in the Southlands off to the sides or the peripherals of the surface world, some of those people would feel called and they would go to Mount Meru, this circular island at the center of the world. And the people on the inner earth, like I said, they would also come up into our world, just like the Native Americans talk about the different lower ages or worlds that they had ascended through time and time again, climbing the reed of the world or whatever. So there was this triple meeting of humanoids, some that landed straight down from above, that tend to be more like albino in color. The surface dwellers, who live under a completely different type of light source, who were more melanated and darker in color, and they came to the center. And then the quote unquote like red nation that lives within the earth or whatnot. There's different there's always exceptions to these things or whatever, but there's this meeting place and this gathering place at this place where there's the largest opening in the earth, um, known as this mountain called Rupus Nigra. Which I don't know a lot of people that talk about the theory that Rupus Nigra, this lofty black mountain at the center of the world, which is a type or a prototype of various holy sites and mountains. Olympus would be a good example. This gathering mountain, Mount Hermon, from Enoch or whatever. Um, but I believe that that is a volcano, that that's actually an open hollow mountain with electrical discharge. It's the cave of Zeus. It's called Psychros Cave in Greek. And this was a place of pure energy, energized. And it had its effects. The center of the Garden of Eden, a physical place here on Earth, notwithstanding heavenly types of the Garden of Eden, because there are heavenly types of the earthly ones, or vice versa, right? That's it. I don't know. That's the plasma apocalypse. I mean, there's more. I don't want to
Oh
talk your ear
yeah,
off.
I already know all the tangents and facets this can go down, and that was a good core breakdown of kind of this. It seems like a cyclical phenomena throughout human history, is the way it's described. There's periods where there's, like you said, a charging and a discharging period,
Yeah.
and when it's discharged, those are the magical times when the plasma is its most prevalent. These are the times where Wizard had staffs that sparked light through them, type of stuff, you know what I mean? Because they were channeling the ether, the energy, the plasma, all that kind of thing. And like I said, it comes with changes in buoyancy, so people could fly. All sorts of crazy stuff was going on whenever this discharge happened. And what happens is, because it's destructive. It's not just creative in itself. It changes everything every time it happens. Some could call it a reset of a sort, because once it dissipates and wanes away, people kind of forget that there was magic at one point.
Right.
And then we end up going into a realm where it's like we're in now, where we brute force it through electricity, through DC currents, through burning things, and we can have a very limited capacity. And magic's just something that doesn't exist anymore. And we have a similar concept in the Little Season theory. So it's that, okay, these buildings everywhere were created during a time when there was energy in the air that could be just harnessed extremely easily. And these churches are energy harvesters. Those spires are like that for that reason. They have weird things on top because they're antennas. They're not just places of worship. They were functional tools for a time when things were different. They're not like we are now. And obviously, we would say, well, Christ was around, so maybe he was emanating some kind of energy of some kind that was available, more readily available. Obviously, you may go down the idea, well, it's simply just that this ether was around, this plasma was around, more prevalent. And what comes with these stories of fantasy lands where this was happening is monsters everywhere. Odd, disgusting, insectoid, beast-like creatures just in all over the place, just like a scourge on the earth, and knights killing them, and it's valiant tales of exploring dungeons and wiping out the creatures for the treasure or whatever it is. And that's World of Warcraft stuff, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Quite literally, in a sense, because they're called phantazoids. And what you're saying is, at those higher depressurized places has life above us, like we have here on this
and
realm.
underneath too.
Yeah, and where it's less dense, they're bigger.
Right.
So here we get what they're called. What are they called again? The tiny little microscopic bear. They call them something bears, don't they?
Tardigrades.
Tardigrades, yeah. And they're everywhere. There's probably more tardigrades than anything else on Earth. Actually look into this microscopic creature everywhere. And they're pretty much indestructible through every sense of in every sense. And they're tiny. But up there, they're huge. And what probably would have happened when there was a depressurization event, they would have come down. Slowly as well, because it's like buoyancy floating down, like a hot air balloon type of thing. And all those horrible, crazy, insane creatures up there would have come down. I don't know if you remember. Did you ever remember seeing a film? And you probably did a breakdown on this. It was an old one. It's when CGI was first like a thing, and it was getting its legs, and it was fuck all Final Fantasy, and it was nothing like.
I have not seen that one.
It was
actually.
nothing like the video games. Okay, they went their own way. They just took the name and just did their own thing. Right? It's nothing like the video games, but it quite literally is about phantazoid plasma creatures manifesting into the world of physicals, and whenever they went through a person, it would kill them instantly. But they were just traveling through walls, and like it was nothing. It didn't really exist to them, And they have this weird technology where they can kill them, and it's an action film, But it's kind of everything about what you described is in that film. And you do a lot of breakdowns on your channel in the movies, and it gets like they really are telling us about this over and over again. Your theory gets more credence by the fact that it's clearly inspired so much artwork and so much media telling that concept and that story over and over again, which is why like I hold a lot of weight to it, because it's kind of like if they're using it for inspiration to make money in their corrupt system, there's probably something to it. That's what and it's always
Yeah.
the same story. And obviously you also have the idea of that there's this pillar in the middle of the earth, like a tree. When the plasma's present, the world tree it was known as in like let's say Viking or Norse mythology. Was it you say no more than me.
Yggdrasil.
You go. You explain all the facets
Yeah,
this
well,
can go
it's
down.
it's not just the center of the Earth. That's just the largest one. That's the biggest one. It's the main one. Um, and then it'll expand out from the North Pole, and these openings will get smaller and smaller with exception from time to time, and and that is where poles rise from the ground. They're poles, they're rods and reeds and pillars of plasma in different places. And in my new book, I call these places of power. And that there were these are the very first cities for post-apocalyptic survivors because they saw the light regionally, locally. And they would flock to these beams or pillars or poles or sky beams that rise up locally near them. Now the wise would follow the largest one that was always in the north. And all of this, all these things are always in the north. And as far as the movies go, any kind of apocalyptic movie, they always say we're going north for safety. There's a safe place in the north, or like that comes. I've seen that a million times. But that's not just the north. There are places that are provided locally in the Southlands, out here in the peripherals of the north. Um, um, that are also mini versions of this. So, for example, you have a lot of people that believe, well, I think the Garden of Eden was here in Florida, or I think the Garden of Eden was here in this other place. It may be they had a type of Eden or a type of place that provided power and energy and life sustaining, but at a smaller level and a lesser level than that of Hyperborea or the Garden of Eden, the North Pole. And I believe that we see glimpses of this into one of the most recent of these events, which took place during the Dark Ages, which was actually an age of light, whenever there was terrestrial light that lit up the heavens and caused a color spectrum shift and change in our world, where the sky became different colors, and therefore we became familiar with a completely different type of color spectrum. So we have a golden age because the sky was amber or golden in color and more of a yellow color. Just like many people easily can look back within recent decades and remember the sun being yellow instead of white or whitish blue, whatever it is today. Um, and during the Dark Ages, it's a great example of this time when the light ruled the world. It was the day as opposed to the night and the darkness that we now live in, that we need to create electricity and try to, come up with our own lighting and sources and stuff. Um, During the Dark Ages, we have all of these little examples of what I've been theorizing about, which is you think of the Dark Ages, especially as it's, portrayed in fiction like Monty Python and stuff. They always show fog all over the place, everywhere, mud, you know what I mean? Well, that's because this was immediately after an apocalyptic event whenever the world shook and liquefaction caused the waters within the earth to rise up, as well as the pressure being released from within the earth, pushing the waters up. And everything becomes very muddy and mucky and less dense. And therefore, we have a lot of clay everywhere, which becomes substance for building for survivors that create clay houses and stuff, which would densify over time with added pressure over time. And then the reappearance of the focal point, the sun and stuff, which would bake these objects and make them, turn them into rock, essentially. And then we have, obviously, like you said, the otherworldly monsters of the time, which there's ample evidence that these were real creatures, maybe cartoonified over time, maybe having an element of fiction to them, becoming caricatures of their former and very real selves, like unicorns and different types of chimera and stuff, which survived in bestiaries that were written by priests and monks who had an oath to God that this is their truth-telling path. This is their official, historic, absolute record-keeping truths that were collected by nobility and survivors of the time who went out to collect a census of who survived and who's claiming what land and stuff. And this leads to what was called the Domesday Book. And that was one of the initial censuses of the time, which I believe it was taken because the nobility of the world, which are these survivors, um, who claim lineage that harkens back to the Garden of Eden or Atlantis or whatever name people want to give to it. And Domesday is doomsday, and it means that doom means dome. It comes from the same word. Gloom, like people talk about doom and gloom. That's doom and gloom, and especially in churches and stuff, like old-fashioned ones. That's doom and gloom. We don't talk about doom and gloom. We just want to concentrate on whatever. Okay, fine. I'd like to be balanced and include the doom and gloom with the good news and, insight, and so I can be wise and walk a middle path. But doom comes from dome and gloom comes from glow. It literally means to glow. So it's the glowing of the dome, or as they called it in, the ancient northern languages, the Velkin. It was known as like the firmament, basically.
Hmm.
But during the medieval times, we have chronologies that are not widely discussed. They're not given much, if any, attention at all, like the Anglo-Saxon chronicles. Um, they document atmospheric phenomenon that perfectly matches plasma discharges from the Earth, geoplasmas, and what appear and are described as serpents or the seraphim, and they're not snakes by any means. I don't personally think any of these references to a serpent being is a snake. I can understand why people would think that because they're similar, they look similar, whatever. But we have all of this evidence. It's not just in fiction. You know what I mean? I just happen to love fiction. I just love the movies. I love fiction. I love stories. But the reason I play Dungeons and Dragons and the reason I play the Magic card games and what was that video game that you mentioned? The
Final
role,
Fantasy.
role playing,
Oh,
the role
World
playing
of World
game.
of Warcraft.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've never actually played that one, but I did like the movie.
I've seen people play it, but I've never played it myself personally.
Well,
It's a consuming lifestyle. I've heard. I don't want to get
yeah,
involved.
I've seen people be consumed by these things.
Yeah.
But the reason it's so compelling, I believe, to so many people out there, and especially so many quote unquote black sheep, you know what I mean? Just because you're a nerd or a geek or a dork or whatever doesn't automatically default to you have to like Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. The reason why these people are drawn to these things of fantasy, the Dark Ages, knights, samurai, fighting monsters, energy transfer, magic, etc., is because there is truth there. And they feel that truth and they sense it and they pick up on it and they know there's more. And so they can't reconcile the historic truth of it with what we're told in the modern world. So they recreate and they recreate and they play. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
it makes them feel good for some reason. And I like to play too, but my playing form is also studying, just
Mhm.
researching. You know what I mean? And the
Mhm.
Middle Ages, specifically what's known as the Dark Ages, are of particular interest to me, especially whenever we have all of these different Christian ties. Because, like a little bit of my background, I've heard you and some other people, kind of wonder about my belief system or whatever, which I like. I'm glad. I would like people to wonder, instead of me just having to tell people. I like people to see what I am through my actions and my words and stuff. But I sort of started this truth-seeking path a long time ago when I first started going to church. And for me, they were offering all these answers to life's mysteries and stuff, and that was intriguing to me. So I went to church and mastered the New Testament, memorized the whole entire thing. And that led me to wanting to be a youth pastor. And I wanted to go, I resonate with younger people and I didn't, not so much the older people, but I wanted to excite the younger generation. And so I went to this Nazarene Bible College to be a youth pastor. And then I saw a lot of hypocrisy and stuff, and it had left a bad taste in my mouth. So I stopped that and I went somewhere else. But then I started learning Messianic Judaism, and that led me into learning the Hebrew roots of these different Christian values that are taught in churches and stuff. But the most valuable thing I got from that path was learning and teaching myself the Hebrew alphabet. And it immensely opened up the Old Testament for me because the parts that I used to think were boring, like genealogies and name after name, which I don't even care. I'm like, okay, Bob beget Jane and Jane beget whatever, you know.
Hmm.
Now I'm like, these names are descriptions. These are words that carry meaning and they were described with purpose behind it, you know. And then I'm like, wow, well, why do we name people the way we name them today? Because that name sounds cool. Great, it's meaningless. It doesn't even have any meaning to it anymore. We've stripped the meaning away from the words and they've become nicknames, which is like has ties to Saint Nick and the Nicolaitans of Revelation, shortcuts and taking the meaning away from the original terms and therefore all life, basically. So that was amazing to me. And I studied the Hebrew, but then I read a couple of books that really changed my perspective. It was Fossilized Customs by Lou White. That one was really good, and he really emphasized um, the Proto-Sinaitic language or the Paleo Hebrew. And I started learning that it was picture form as opposed to just meaningless glyphs. You know what I mean? And that really excited me to learn the connection of all these languages. And then I read "Come Out of Her, My People" by Dr. C.J. Coster, and he was talking about, you know, coming out of Babylon and these changes that were happening in the world and shifts that were happening even within different religions and belief systems, but specifically Christianity in general, and the changes that he saw and its connections to ancient paganism and stuff. So I thought these things were super interesting. And then, of course, you know, that got me to Genesis 6, asking about the giants. Nobody had any answers or anything. It was just, oh, God's ways are higher than our ways, and it's a mystery, and just accept it at that instead of
Mm.
searching, you know, as it talks about in Proverbs, you know, that it's the glory of kings to search things out, and it's God's glory to hide them. And, you know, that's the purpose, is to hide them so we can find them, the wise people to find them.
Mhm.
Anyways, I forgot what I was talking about. I took us on a huge tangent of my
Well,
past.
I think you were trying to maybe explain to people you have a biblical foundation to most of what you do.
Yeah,
Would you call yourself a Christian? Probably not, because you're disappointed with the churchianity structures and things in place and the hypocrisy with the rest of it. I think a lot of people listening can empathize with that for you in many ways. But, you know, I'm not here to die cast you as anything. You are who you are. You do what you do. You know, everyone knows where I stand on my beliefs when it comes to Jesus Christ. I think he was a real man. I think he really died and rose again. I think he's not simply just symbolic, but very literal as well. I think he works both ways personally. And I think if you want to fit it into your theory, and if I could just speculate, I think he was there at a
sure.
time just before a major release. Or
Yeah,
maybe or something prior, maybe
yeah.
a falling away.
Especially the Dark Ages. Like
Yeah.
I can see the evidence that's there. And, you know, so going back to like Satan's little season theory, right?
Mhm.
And I don't like to speak for all of everyone that leans towards this theory or whatever, because then people can get easily confused as, you know, and not search it out for themselves to develop their own ideas and perspective on that particular theory. That we had a millennial reign. It has already happened that, and therefore, I believe personally, because I think it's cyclical, there will be another millennial reign on the way. That there will be a true enlightenment of spirit and energy and peaceful living and these things that are on the way, that are on the horizon, that I'm watching out for by studying these omens of the satanic world that we live in now
Mm.
and seeing, you know, the changes that are happening now. But during the Dark Ages, for example, we've got the stories of the saints that were superhuman. You know what I mean? These different saints of the modern church or whatever. They're sort of turning them into just iconic religious heroes, when in reality they were superheroes. They had power, like divine power. They had super. They were like comic book heroes, superheroes with
Mm.
actual powers. You know, one could fly. Like there was a monk that could fly or whatever. Um, and you know, they couldn't die
Mhm.
unless their heads were chopped off half the time. You know what I mean? Like they,
Even then, not necessarily so, because I think St. Albany of
yes,
Britain, and this church is still there in Britain, he was beheaded And then where his blood fell, a well sprang up of water, and then he picked up his own head, and I think he carried on. And it's
Yes.
kind of ended. They couldn't kill him.
And
I
there's
don't know what they
multiple
did, you know.
examples of that too, of the
Mm,
saints having been decapitated and then picking up their own heads and walking around. And then this also, I mean, it sounds like certain old wives' tales and Mother Goose stories or whatever of, the headless horseman and things that have become
mm,
made more fantastic and put into movie form or whatever. But these are true, actual, real tales of people who had power
mm,
that your common people, or specifically nobility and rulers of the time, felt threatened by.
mm,
For example, John the Baptist is a prime example from the New Testament. You know what I mean? Like of something like that. They were not just afraid of the information that they had, but of them personally as a person who had power and maybe related to others that had power. And so they sought them out. And, I believe that a lot of these people, um, in part, may have gained this power from where they lived. A lot of the ancient persecuted Christians lived underground within these same cavernous systems that I believe have an influx of this life-giving, empowering terrestrial geoplasma that rushes through it. That's like a form of cold plasma. So,
mm,
you could bathe in it. It's fine. It's not going to burn you or anything or electrocute you. Um, and so these are the areas where they went because they were survivors from a prior world or an older age. And so they went underground, just as the
mm,
Bible talks about how people will go underground or whatever. So they went underground. Um, there was side effects from being underground within these places of power. And then whenever they come up to the surface, when things are settling down and they meet the survivors that are out here up here on the surface world, they're seen as entirely different and strange and weird. And they were persecuted and hunted down because there's an energetic opposition between their positive energy and
mm,
satanic, evil, negative energy that's up here on the surface. It goes back and forth,
interesting.
which helps to also understand, for me personally, the architecture of that time. Like you were talking about how you can see above, obviously, we have spires and very Gothic, pointy type structures that clearly are used to work with the atmosphere of the time, obviously. And then the domes as well. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people really focus on the spires, but the domes are equally important.
Oh,
The domes,
I think Chris of Biocharisma, who might be listening now, would disagree with you on that. He builds domes for a living today, and he is inspired by this theory because he knows what it takes to make a dome, and he looks at
mhm,
these structures and he's like, how the hell did these people do this? Like, this is incredible. Like the amount of what it takes to make a dome of that scale and detail and with structure and purpose is like
right.
unbelievable. Absolutely. And
Well,
yeah,
under these conditions of today, but if we
oh
don't
yeah.
project that onto the ancient past, and there may have been different conditions like everything being lighter in weight or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, then we can allow for possibilities to happen. But electromagnetically speaking, a conductive dome will draw energy to it. Electricity will be more attracted to, for example, the Dome of the Rock
Mm-hmm.
than it would a spire, because a spire, the positive energy flows up from the earth into the clouds above or the area above.
Mm-hmm.
And we get electrical discharge like lightning or even larger during these times of energetic amplification of the atmosphere because of a negative buildup or a negative charge on the bottom side of these clouds that builds up in one area, and it's a whole lot of negative electrical field that builds up, and then it wants to release itself and ground itself. But if you dissipate that with positive flow and positive charge that's released that we can't really see because it's invisible from these spires, it just it dilutes it
Mm-hmm.
with it adds the positive energy so it's not so built up. But regardless, that's the top of the structure. Underneath, we have other things like the cathedrals of old. And I visited many of these cathedrals in my local town here, and they have these strange ventilation systems that come up underneath the pews and stuff. And I ask them all the time what they're for and where they come from and stuff. And the cathedrals themselves are self-contained. They don't just have windows, to let the sunshine in or whatever. They have small windows which are ventilation They're not windows so you can just look outside or whatever. It's to vent, and it's to manage the energy that is on the inside of this container, which is built right on top of these places of power.
Hmm.
So many of these cathedrals are built on top of these places of power where the geoplasmas would come up from, and they would collect it within the actual building, tune it through the pipe organs and whatnot, to heal. They were healing centers, just like many people have proposed.
Hmm.
And it also helps me to understand why there are catacombs directly under those places as well. Why would the dead be buried in that particular area? And why on earth would you build a holy site, a house of God, on top of such a nasty graveyard? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like the two don't mix unless they do. Unless we can reconcile stories like the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel, with this power and this energy that brings dead things back to life and allows
Hmm.
them to live again. So they put their dead, it would stand to reason to me, in these places in the hopes that they would come back to life. You know what I mean? And then
Hmm.
they build these structures on top of it, to benefit as a byproduct themselves during their actual lives, to become re-energized in these cathedrals.
Yeah. Well, cathedrals themselves, like when you talk about the vents to control the flow of energy, it's kind of like if you look at it from like an aerial view, they are quite literally like transistors or cathodes on a circuit board. All cities are designed to like flow the energy in many
Yeah,
ways. Maybe in England more so than maybe the newer cities, which seem like maybe in America, because it seems like in Britain, everything, all the roads are built to flow with the land. They're not built in
right.
squares. It's a very different type of. It looks like a mess, but when you actually see it from an aerial view at nighttime from a plane, the lights moving around, people going through these paths, it's like the veins in a human body or something like that. You know, the way it's all kind of structured, it's like neurons, you know, and roundabouts are like the center of a neuron, and people and many things fire out from all around it. And it's kind of, you don't really have roundabouts in America. It's a different scenario, and it's like one seems more
Yeah.
in tune with like flowing with it, and the other seems more in tune with trying to control it in a way. And maybe it's like it's
Yes.
a result of being built in different time periods where the energy did flow differently and was of a different time, you know, in many ways. I don't know. It's just thoughts coming
Yeah.
into my own mind
Well,
there.
these are the electrical grids.
Hmm.
I really like. There's this channel called My Lunch Break, and he really gets
Yeah,
into the old world. You probably have seen him, you know.
I've seen a
But this
few. Yeah.
last video that he did was talking about. He sort of mentioned and touched on the cathedrals and these patterns that seem to match, like microchips and energy grids and conduits and things like that. And I completely agree with that.
Hmm.
But I don't just see it. If I can see it there, then I might be able to see it in other places, and I have. So I'll give you an example. Dream catchers. Dream catchers originally were designed to protect babies that were in the crib from ghosts, spirits, demonic activity, or whatever. And they had a real notion that creating this physical object would somehow trap this negative energy so that it wouldn't go down further and harm the baby, right?
Hmm.
So my theory on this is that dream catchers are the exact same thing, that they act as little labyrinths, or conduits, like little electrical grids, especially if, say you were to dip it in salt water and then let it dry out or something like that, right? The salt helps to act as an electrolyte to allow that electricity to pass through it.
Hmm.
But let's say that we did have plasma that was in the atmosphere, right? In mass, electrically amplified atmosphere. There's dangers there. There's, I mean, it's just like fire. You can use it for life-giving properties. You can use it to help you as a tool and stuff if you understand how to harness it and really work with it. Or it can zap you, it could electrocute you. In some cases, it might even be able to petrify people and take all the hydration out of their bodies instantly and statue form them, on the spot. So it was dangerous to those who were ignorant of what it was. But they started learning its likes, its dislikes, just like the bestiaries of old. They would write down the pros and cons of these different animals. They would learn the pros and cons of the fireworms and the dragons and the serpents that were flying through the air, the flying fiery serpents, as
Hmm.
they're called. And so one of the things that they realized was that these plasmas, whether they be ball form, which is like toroidal ball lightning, streaking through the air and leaving a little tail behind it, or if they be more worm-like and following electrical currents, oftentimes next to actual currents like rivers and creeks and things where a lot of people see ghosts and stuff, um, they are attracted to our electromagnetic field, or
Mm.
inversely repelled by it, depending on what our electromagnetic field is comprised of. But babies tend to be very powerful electromagnetically. They just came into this world, they're fresh, and there's therefore so is their electromagnetic field. If things decay over time and get weaker and weaker in this type of a world that we live in, the babies would be the strongest spiritually, electromagnetically, however you want to say it. And so these plasmas are attracted, certain types of plasmas attracted to newborns and toddlers and stuff. So they needed extra protection. While they slept, it makes sense to me. My theory is that they would hang this grid that could trap these plasmas or electricity so that it wouldn't go further down and harm the child while it was sleeping and therefore preserve its life, catching the bad dream before it can enter into the child. And
Mm.
then, it's no longer there
Just,
in the morning or whatever.
just like the rose window of a cathedral, you mean? So something like this.
Yes. Yes, exactly like
Yeah.
that.
And that's why
That,
churches
that
have them. It's the same principle, is to harness and basically trap the energy so it doesn't just set fire to the whole city.
yeah, they're
So,
protective sigils. I think this is one of the origins of actual sigils. And, I don't know. It's not just a pretty design, or there's a reality and a science behind these things.
mhm.
You know what I mean? And many people who don't understand it um are in danger of harming themselves and other people by just walking blindly into creating sigils that can attract or repel electromagnetic forces that are very powerful.
Hmm. Which is
But
what
yeah,
a lot of
anyway,
Satanists do, and a lot of Luciferians do that. People, Aleister Crowley magic with a K at the
yeah,
end deals with sigil making. Well, it's witchcraft. That's what we would call it today. It's magic.
yes,
It's not as colourful as it used to be, but you're still dealing with the same principle. You create a sigil, which is a representation of something in the spirit realm, and you create a
hmm,
channel and a mirror through doing such a thing, and then you draw those energies into the physical realm by creating a nexus point through the sigil. That's what magic is. That's why they do these things, and that's why everything we say and do matters in a very literal sense. It affects matter. It matters,
yes,
and
yeah,
these are not these vibrations, these ethereal concepts like mouth noises are not just simple vibrations of your vocal cord, and they don't go any further than that. They quite literally change the fabric of reality with every new thing you
yes,
create and work. And that's why artwork is magic. It's the same principle. Artwork
yes,
sends out frequencies and vibrations which manipulate matter, and that
right,
includes how you behave. And that's what
yes,
magicians are in the game of, manipulating how you think and behave through
right.
artwork. That's what they're doing,
And it's a form of food as well. So not I mean art the same thing.
Hmm.
Like when you take in art, you're taking it in like you're having a meal.
Yeah.
Or like you and I, we're sitting down together having a meal through our words right now. We're sharing with one another what we have prepared for each other.
Hmm.
And the art is the same thing, which is why I'm really excited to see your new presentations about the art and what you have to say about it.
Yeah.
But these people are taking this into their bodies, into their soul. It's becoming a part of them with the things that we look at, the things that we hear, the things that we smell and that we taste and eat. It's not just what we put into our mouth, but what we put into ourselves and what we allow into ourselves. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So to me, it really reinforces the spiritual part of myself that resonates with, and understands more of like, the religious side of things, I guess, not official religion, but just that there's a battle between good and evil, that there's a positive and a negative, electromagnetically, spiritually, energetically, and that they manifest, as the Bible says, um, the invisible produces the physical world,
Hmm.
So these invisible types produce the physical world that we live in, or our physical bodies. They have an effect on our physical bodies. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But anyways, going back to the plasma apocalypse, it's not just the bad news. It's not just the scary of the sky opening, people floating up into the heavens, electricity coming down, danger, etc. That's the destruction that that comes before the renovation. And the renovation is what I personally look forward to. A renewed world, a renewed earth, a beautiful place that has all of the toxins removed from it,
Hmm.
including the ocean, which is quickly becoming toxic in nature from my research. But many parts of the world, including humanity, etc. It's a complete resetting so that we can go back into what people would call the millennial reign or the golden age, or even physically, researching, like I said, a physical paradise or a Garden of Eden that is on Earth,
Hmm.
either in smaller forms like these places of power around the world, or in the largest form, which is the heart chakra of the Earth, or the homeland of the Earth that many different tribal people talk about in their oral traditions, how they have been told to come back home, and they've been told the signs of what to look for. So, for example, like the Aztecs, they had in their creation story, they have a sign that they were to look for where they would finally find home, and they could, when they saw this sign, they could settle there. And the sign was what appeared to them to be a cactus that shot up out of the ground that had an eagle on top of it, spreading its wings, and a serpent in its mouth, right? And for me, this is just speaks volumes of geoplasma that's erupting from the earth, creating these sort of trees of life or world tree type symbolism and stuff, especially with the cosmic bird. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because whenever these geoplasmas shoot up, they're pillars at first. They're straight arrows. They're straight paths, and they turn into because they split off at the top and become more aurora types way up into the high atmosphere, and they become auroras, which now turns into a form of like Quetzalcoatl, of South American belief systems, of the feathered serpent. It's a serpent or seraphim or a plasma, a geoplasma basically, that's coming up and erupting out of the earth that spreads out. It loses that velocity and stuff, and it just becomes aurora-like, which becomes feathery in nature. If you've seen the auroras, you could easily see time and time again. They look like angels, birds, feathers and wings and stuff like that. Um, but people hearken back to these things, which is uh, a break from it all, a break, especially some of us in this world that don't resonate with this frequency of satanic energy, that we look for something on the horizon that is a relief for us, for our spirits, for our soul, for our body, for everything, that we vibe with paradise, with good living, with love, and all of the fruits of the spirit,
Hmm.
as it talks about in the Bible. And I believe that there is not just like a conceptual heavenly place. And that's how my second book actually starts off. The first line of my book is, there is a physical terrestrial paradise. And then, start talking about the different myths and stuff that talk about this place. So, for
Hmm.
example, one of the names that it has gone by, like within Greek mythology, is the Garden of the Hesperides. And we get clues that are handed to us as to where the physical location of this place would be, if there is in fact a physical location on Earth that is the quintessential Garden of Eden. And the Hesperides were known to be at the farthest most western point of the world. Well, now I have to go back to cosmology, because in the modern cosmology, there is no such place. You just keep going west forever,
Hmm.
infinitely, around and around and around and around, and you'll never find the Garden of the Hesperides. You'll be lost. You'll be a wandering tribe forever. But in the ancient world, the west was downwards, and it literally meant that they had
Hmm.
Orient and Occident, right? And Orient was up. It literally meant upwards towards the stars, and Occident literally meant down into the earth. The furthest place on the surface before you go down into the earth was where the Garden of Eden or the Hesperides lied, Hyperborea, etc. And that is the what the Hopi call the back door or the back entrance of the world.
Hmm.
And it is Rupus Nigra from my research. It is this circular land at the North Pole, cross-sectioned by four rivers, with a crystal clear, pure lake of water that wells up from within the earth at its center. And then right in the middle of that crystal clear lake is the Black Mountain, the Dark Mountain, which, by the way, because it's called Rupus Nigra, which means black rock, essentially, right? Rupus nigra et altissima, which is the high and lofty black rock,
Hmm.
because this is more like a tower, not a gradual mountain range or anything. This is a
Mm.
tower that shoots up out of the earth,
No,
much like
like a monolith from 2001, something like that.
yes,
Yeah, interesting.
um, probably more naturally closer to
Yeah,
something I imagine like
a
the
silica.
Giant's Causeway or
Yeah,
what do you call that? The Devil's Tower in Wyoming.
like
You know what I mean?
a silica pillar of sorts, something like that.
Yes, very
You
similar.
mentioned a second about the West. Can you just
Yes.
briefly cover that? Because I think I might have a piece of information to add to that. But what did
Yeah,
you
sure.
mean about the West again? Could you just cover that
Yeah, sure.
quickly?
So I believe that in the ancient times, west essentially was down
Hmm.
into the earth, and the east was up towards the stars,
Okay,
and that they had north and south, towards the outside and towards the inside.
interesting. Yeah, because I discovered this a while ago, and I've kind of mentioned it a couple of times. But if you look at a Freemasonic drawing where they have the two pillars, the checkerboard floor, the eye in the middle, a ladder on its side, Yakin and Boaz, there's always an outline. They put a square around it, and they put the node points of north, east, south, and west. But west is on top. It's north. And I've always wondered why.
Yes. Well,
Why
that's
is west at the top and north is on the
so to
side? You
go
know.
right to so if you go north, which is to the center of my world as I see it cosmologically speaking, you go north, which is right in the middle, then you will eventually get to the west, which goes down into the
Right.
earth. And the west it takes you into different levels of the inner earth as is described by Enoch and stuff. You have the necropolis, the place of
Hmm.
the dead, where there's plasmas of different types of like greenish color, I guess you could say, which is really just the oxygen at low levels.
Hmm.
Green, that's why the green is always associated with like this Hades type underworld magic and things of that nature. And it's also why the North Pole has the green aurora borealis.
Hmm.
Those colors change when you have them elevate in their altitude. They'll become more red spectrum and purpley and things of that nature. But
Hmm.
west was downwards into the earth. So even biblically speaking, regarding Lucifer and the Lucifer's fall, Lucifer doesn't come from, the west coast of the United States and go to the east coast like the sun does. Lucifer fell from up to down. So as lightning strikes from the east upwards above us to the west downwards is how Lucifer fell. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's for me understanding these esoteric directions, because now they are esoteric, they're not commonly known, helps me to really fit the puzzle pieces into the places where I didn't quite understand. Like for example, the Pillars of Hercules also were said to be at the farthest westernmost parts of the world, the
Hmm.
edge of the world, actually. So people would say, "Oh, well, that's the Rock of Gibraltar, and it's just the westernmost parts of the Mediterranean." When in reality, people had gone even back during the ancient times beyond the Rock of Gibraltar. They've been to Spain. They've been to places that are a bit further out than the Rock of Gibraltar. And I don't believe that they were talking about traditional east and west as far as left and right go on a globe. That they
Hmm.
were talking about the westernmost, the northernmost portions before you go down into the earth, or east as in the stars that are in the east, which is upwards,
Okay, right.
or eastern stars.
Stop right there. So that's interesting because I found an image now. I'm just going to share it on the screen for people to see. I'm not sure
Okay.
you might have to switch to the video in order to see this. There'll be a 20-second delay, but you will see it eventually. But I found here the map I was talking about, and they've put east in the north on this, and they face east, and west is to the south, and north and south are to the left and right. And again, this is how it just seemed odd that they've positioned it like this. And I do know in Freemasonry, they say I've been traveling in the East. It's like a phrase they use as a nod and a wink to being a Freemason. But I've come back to the West with the knowledge I've gathered there, stuff like that. Do you get what I mean? And people
Yes.
on the surface would think, oh, he's been traveling in China or something. But the truth
No.
is this, you're talking about the place of the stars.
Yes.
And this is obviously the Order of the Eastern Star is the female faction of Freemasonry as well. And I'm just looking at this now. I don't know if you can see it on the screen on the YouTube video if you just go click the
Oh, I
live
see.
stream. And yeah, east is north to these people. Do you get what I mean? That's how the compasses are aligned in Freemasonry. And just everything you're saying, I just remembered this random piece of information I remember seeing once. And it's kind of like there's something odd. There's definitely
Right.
something odd going on there. And I don't know how else
Yes,
to.
this this makes sense, and this helps for me to explain also why the tribes were lost, especially, pertaining to like the 10 tribes of Israel, the 10 lost tribes of Israel or whatever.
Hmm.
They became wandering, nomadic, lost tribes. They were the lost boys. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like they were literally lost because they didn't understand where they were. All the directions changed. The way people think flipped upside down with an electromagnetic polarity reversal. The directions changed. North and south definitely flipped places if there was an electromagnetic shift. North right now is actually south, as from an electromagnetic polarity viewpoint.
Hmm.
It's actually south. But whenever we flip again, it will be north once more. And north will be north, which means it's true north. And that's the time of reliability when you know the directions. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? But now we're lost, where we've erased the western part of the inner earth and the concept that there is such a place as a hollowed out section, worlds underneath our feet, that ancient texts all agree that there's another world down there, an entire world, not just like small little cities like in Cappadocia, like little tunnels and stuff like that, but vast expanses that have atmosphere and stuff like we do up here on the surface.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the east, which is upwards and beings traveling the stars and star beings and star gates and openings within the firmament that lead out of here at the very least.
Hmm. So, but from your cosmological enclosed system model, then it's kind of like there is a sphere and there's layers within it, like plate layers, in a sense,
Yes,
and like
kind of,
and
very
like
much.
and like the compass as we understand it, we put it flat on our plane, but really it's more inverted onto its side, and east goes up, and then west goes
Yes,
down, and I see,
very
what, I see
similar.
and north is just like a all pointing to the center of that sphere from every angle. South is going out to the edge of that sphere, but it's
Right.
from our perspective, it's a dome above us, but that dome keeps
Yes.
going underneath. Do you get what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Similar.
that is
Yes.
kind of like
I look at it a bit more like a mushroom shape. You know what I
okay,
mean? So there would be the top, the cap of the mushroom would be the dome,
interesting.
right? And then we would live under the dome. But
Hmm.
then there is otherworldly tunnel systems that go down, and there's a mycelial network to the mushrooms and the funguses and stuff. So all of these other mushrooms, which would be other worlds, are physically connected to each other, as opposed
Interesting.
to being physically separate balls that float around independent of one
Yeah.
another, that they're actually physically connected to one another on the peripherals of our world. So if we could open up the sky and look, we would see all of these like neurons in the mind, all of these places that are physically actually connected to one another, um, through below, actually. Like,
That's an interesting because I love different cosmological worldviews. I'm not sold on any model. I don't know.
yeah,
How can I possibly know from my perspective what it actually is? I have no idea. I'm not going to lay claim that it's definitely this. Right? And I've heard so many
right.
models. Like, have you heard of the concave Earth
Yeah,
concept about
yeah.
the inner sphere and we're on the outside of the sphere looking into the center type of concept? And I've heard so many. And yours about this actually there is a dome. It has a flat surface, but then it's like layers go down in like a thinning kind of mushroom shape. I like that one. That's an interesting concept. And again, it could be the case. I don't know. I remember the Hopi story of the ant people. Research I've done for my own book, and it's this idea that during a massive disaster of some kind, perhaps what you're talking about here, people from underground who were like insectoid ant people took the humans under in that and kept them safe, and they lived with them for a long time. And then eventually the people resurfaced with the help of these ant people and carried on afterwards. And this particular this Hopi tribe talks about this as this is where we came from. We came from under the
Right.
ground. Ant people helped
Yes.
us. That's just it's
Yeah.
like a known to them. It's not like a weird mythology or anything. It's kind of
Yeah.
that's what happened to us. That's just what happened. You know what I mean? I can't explain it in any other
Yes.
way. And it's I just love how matter of a fact a lot of these tribes are about the what we call mythologies from like a Western anthropology perspective. It's like they're not joking. They're not like they don't call it a myth. They're not talking about it with like an odd reverence or anything like a
No.
mysticism. They're like saying, "Oh yeah, ant people saved us. We were under the ground, and
Right.
this horrible event happened, and then after a while, it settled, and we kind of just resurfaced again. And this is where we come from. That's our known history, and we have what we have from that point, but we don't really know what happened before. And they're quite candid about it. The way that when
Yes.
people were talking with them, and
And I
yeah,
also like their perspective of how they describe these beings instead of demonizing them or making it sound like, a lot of cultures, basically any beings from inside the earth are basically from hell and are just evil,
Hmm.
demonic or something. But they talk about the ant people as being helpers. And even some of the beings that they say came down from the sky, they call their sky brothers, you know, and
Hmm.
they refer to animals as brother antelope or, you know, cousin
Hmm.
deer or whatever. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like there was a connection there, which is more earth grounded. I don't know how to describe it. It's
Well,
there's they saw like a family
yeah,
in nature.
this animistic religion that especially was very prevalent in like the North and South Americas and the native people. I did a lot of research on flood mythology for my book,
Mm,
and when you get to that part of the earth, and there are other places, don't get me wrong, especially Australia and the Dreamtime understandings. I'm sure you probably looked into that before, but it's very similar,
mm.
and it's this idea that there were anthropomorphic animal people everywhere in a way, but it's like they weren't people, they were animals that could talk, and it
Yeah,
was the wolf, the eagle, the turtle, the fox, and it's kind of, and like, like eagle stole the moon and did this thing. It's kind of they talk about them like they're actually like walking, talking people, but they call them animals. And
yeah,
you're saying there was a time where, because of this change in charged particles in the eye, like just everywhere, in the mist everywhere, people could telepathically talk with animals, and there was
yes,
no separation of conversation or understanding between every
right,
form of life, and that likely includes trees, mushrooms, mycelia, plants, rivers. Everything is all connected in that
yes,
true spiritual sense. There is no real separation, and
yeah,
and in a way they were all talking to each other, and there was this weird interconnected relationship of animalistic creatures who were quite literally influencing human culture because the animals could talk to humans and had their own wisdoms to buy. And it was like an odd time that doesn't match up with a lot of other histories. It
yeah.
was seemed to be in this one area. Maybe it was a place of power, as you're describing. This weird stuff was happening that can't be explained in any other way, and no one else has described it like that. Do you get what I'm saying? Like Australia is a
Yeah.
hotspot, a real big hotspot for this type of stuff as well. And it's kind of the stuff people were doing to survive these floods as well. And I'm sure the flood might have something to do with a depressurization event from your perspective. I don't really know
Oh,
where you go with that.
100%.
Yeah, but the way
I
they
feel like
describe
I
it,
know exactly how the flood happened, and I'll tell you after you're done.
sure, yeah, but the survivor stories, it's kind of like you have your Noah analogs. It's like kind of like basically they're just retelling Noah's story with a different name.
Yeah,
Man, family,
the ship,
told to build an
family.
ark or a vessel of some kind, take some animals, survived, rebuilt afterwards. That story kind of
Yeah,
gets retold
every
in a
culture.
lot of cultures. Then there's these other
Yeah.
stories, and they're not about Noah. They're not even close to like Noah's survival story.
Right.
And the descriptions are insane of what these people did to survive. And it's kind of like they shrunk themselves down and survived in a hollowed out gourd for 40 days.
Yes.
And it's kind of like,
Yes.
and it's really weird, just weird, mystically unnatural stories that make no sense. And it's kind of like, I don't even know what they're trying to symbolically mean by the descriptions. I can't even figure out what the symbol, if there even is a symbolism in any of it. And I feel like, no, I
Right.
think weird stuff was happening. I think people were quite literally just changing their morphology instantaneously to be something else and doing this weird stuff to kind of survive this mass destruction event of water just coming all over the place. And it's kind of, it baffles the mind. Like, how did they come up with that story? Of all things, it's just so bizarre, like and dreamlike, and
Right.
surreal. And it's kind of what the hell happened? What happened to make them come up with that story? And it's like, is it possible that people were just doing really mystically strange things, like transforming themselves into creatures at a whim
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
thoughts, and it's kind of, and Australia have this dreaming time in the past. They have like an ancient time where everything was just spirit, but physical simultaneously. And it seems like
Yes.
you're describing a time where it was just fresh, like
That's it.
fully energetic, charged plasma mixed with earth type situation. And they lived in this
Yes.
time where the spirits and man were communing with one each other simultaneously. There was no separation from the spiritual world and the physical world. It was like one giant psychedelic trip. Like and they called it the dream time because it was like a dream. Every
Yeah.
inch of existence was behaved like a dream behaves, basically. And now they have echoes of it today, and the oral traditions talk of this time, where there were giant rainbow serpents from the sky carving out the mountains with their bodies, the way they moved.
That's right.
And that sounds to me like plasma ripping
sure
up the ground, you know, from your perspective.
Yes.
And it matches, and this is what I'm saying, there's a lot of things that do corroborate this idea that whatever event you're talking about, whatever religious belief you have, something like this did happen. Like, and every culture does describe what you're describing. And I know David Talbot's work, and my logo is inspired by symbols of an alien sky, where Venus,
Yes, it
Mars,
looks similar.
and Saturn all aligned with each other to create something that looked like this in the sky. And
Yes,
then it basically just massive discharge of plasma came out from it and just destroyed the Earth. And they talk about the Golden Age being a time when Saturn was right next to Earth. You could see it. It's this massive thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's kind of, it was the sun. It was the light of the world, according to his mythology and his interpretation. And then our sun was just this tiny ball that didn't really do anything, you know, compared to Saturn. And then Venus suddenly came in front of it, and Mars lined up with it. And during like the stages of its alignment, it took all sorts of shapes, like a crescent moon, like a bull, like a Taurus symbol.
Yes.
And the plasma discharges that you described are where we get all of our inspiration from for many of the mythological creatures. It's what people saw in the sky, and they just made rock art based on it, basically. And look, and as a Christian, I believe that is the truth, the Christian perspective. But like you said, I have to square that. What he came up with in his research seems very valid. I don't believe in vast space, and like I think it's an enclosed system, like yourself, you know.
Right,
So it can't have been planets lining up like he describes them, unless they were bigger in the sky at some point and quite literally just very close to us, close to the surface, you know. And it's kind of now through a telescope they're quite far away and small. But maybe like that doesn't mean they're millions of miles away and hundreds of millions of miles wide spheres of gas somewhere. But it could be that they're just quite far away from us within the dome. And they did get closer at some point, and they just sparked off of each other and created a mess. Like I don't know, because we have these things called the wandering stars in the Bible, which are planets, and there's a punishment for them in the Book of Enoch. Like they're going to prison at the end of all of this for doing what they did.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Tartarus.
Yeah, they have a place, especially for the wandering stars, because the chaos they cause by moving caused many problems on Earth. Like, not only the mass destructive event, religions were created that worship them as gods, which is wrong because they're not gods, you know. And it's kind of just because they moved. They simply left their first estate where God told them they should remain. You know, moving inspired man to worship them and cause destructive events. It broke the creation in a way. And David Talbot is kind of talking about the same event without any religious lens. And the results of this was destruction. Like mass destruction, a plasma apocalypse, you could call it, of epic proportions, which is echoed throughout all of our mythologies to date. But I draw the line where he says, like, for instance, the Gorgon was just a representation of the serpent's haired lady was plasma coming out from this image. Well, there's also plenty of evidence from my research say, no, there were literal monsters walking around that looked like Gorgons. And they didn't have snakes.
Exactly.
They didn't have snakes for hairs, so he's wrong with that interpretation. They had like red dreadlocks, you know what I mean, of hair, normal hair.
Right.
And it's kind of, so I think it's a bit of this and a bit of that. It's, yes, that symbolism thing can be taken as a symbolic representation of plasma. At the same time, literal monsters were being made by wicked forces that came from the heavens, mixing themselves with humans. So I think there's like a God still exists within your paradigm. Is what I'm trying to say. And the biblical narrative still exists within your paradigm. Now, in terms of like my interpretation of, like, say, the eschatological aspects of all of this, I think there have been plasma apocalypses, but I think what's coming is kind of like a final apex release, which will lead to the new heaven and earth eternal. I still think that's relevant. I think Christ came to explain that. It's kind of saying, look,
like a culminating.
He's saying, look, there's going to be a final pre-release, which will create 1,000-year reign of perfection. And there's been many of those, but this is the final one. After that, there'll be a short season of Satan where it's kind of all the energy's dissipated and it's dark. Yes. It's getting dark now and energyless. You know, the pressure's building up below. You know what I mean? And there's going to be one final. There's no more cycles after this. This is it. This is going to be the big final boom, like done. And
I
then,
certainly hope so.
And then new heaven and earth afterwards. That final rejuvenation. And maybe that's what it was all about. It's like a slow build, and with each pressure release, it leads up to this final new heaven and earth concept, which is what the Bible's talking about as well. And I know I'm in the realm of speculation here. This is not. I don't know what to believe on this.
I live in that realm.
Yeah. But I'm just trying
That's
to square your work with the biblical perspective. I've got some ideas. That's all I've got. I still have my faith in Christ, and I still have the faith in the final being saved for that final moment, that resurrection, and whatever happens in the end. I hope I'm ready for it, whatever it takes. And that's kind of my thoughts on that. If you want to give some final thoughts on that, then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll have some final conversation. But what do you think of just anything I've said there? I'll give it to you. I went off on one.
Man, well, I want to touch on a theory that I have that adds to the idea of the firmament and its actual shape. So cosmology, not just that of the surface of the earth, but of the firmament itself, because I believe the firmament is more complex than just a simple bowl over the world, and it helps to explain the projections and the points of focus that we see up in the heavens that we call the luminaries. And it also helps to explain and rectify David Talbot's idea of these planets aligning or whatever, with the composition of the firmament and how it creates the luminaries underneath us and the parts of the firmament that are lit up from below. So I wanted to talk about that in more detail. I really want to talk about my theory of the flood and how the flood actually happens, like scientifically. And then before I'll come back to that after the break. So that'll give us something to jump on afterwards.
Sure thing.
But I did want to respond now before the break to the Dreamtime, the tribal people from Australia, specifically South America. I've read books of people that have gone, different books from different authors who took it upon themselves to go and live with shamans and witch doctors and the tribal elders of different people, just to see what life was like, to learn from them and to get the ancient knowledge that they had or that they believed that they had. And in one book I was reading, he asked this guy, they were doing ayahuasca basically together, and he was teaching them about like the spirit world and stuff. And he asked them, they have all these medicinal applications of plants. And he asked them, who was the first person, to discover the properties of the plants? Like, how do you, without microscopes and, all this stuff, how do you just know what it does without just popping it into your mouth and crossing your fingers and hoping you don't die or turn colors or, And the response was so simple and made so much sense. He said at that time, the plants told us what they do. The plants spoke to us, and they just talked to us and told us, this is what I'm good for. I'm dangerous to eat, or I can heal you from these ailments. And the plants told us personally, which to me gets back to like the whole telepathy, talking to animals, them talking to us, the C.S. Lewis kind of a world of Tolkien and fantasy and things of that nature. But I thought that was really cool. He just said, well, the plants told us, duh. It required nothing on our parts except for to ask.
I've heard that theory myself. I wrote about it in my own book because I cover ayahuasca, and they'll say, look, the plants just told us, like, because you don't understand. People don't understand like the complex nature of to create ayahuasca. What it actually takes it's not easy. It requires a very specific leaf and a very specific vine, which have these very specific chemicals that only when they're brewed in a very specific way create the necessary components for you to have this thing in your system that won't break down instantly, that can then cause, because there's an MOA inhibitor in the vine. This, I think it's Capensis B, I think it's called, or something like that. I can't remember now. And then you have this specific, there's actually different types of DMT containing leaves you can use, but you have to have this particular vine to do this thing, and it's kind of and they don't even grow, they grow completely independent of one another, and for them to have figured that out, it baffles people's minds. They have no idea how they figured it out. Like modern Western anthropologists don't know the answer. They've just heard from the tribes people. The plants told us. Like, duh. Yeah, and there's another story. King Solomon actually visited that area and told the Aztec king about this method as well. There's another story out there like that too, which is very odd. Very odd. Like the King Solomon, like, yeah, King Solomon came and told our king at the time of the Aztecs, like I think it was the Inca king or something like that, so one of that region, and he taught the knowledge, this pharmakia knowledge to them, and then they went on from there.
Exactly.
I've heard that.
That's exactly what it is too. That's the dividing of the roots and the pharmakia and the pharmaceuticals and the mixing of these substances in order to create a shortcut or a middleman to what we once possibly used to be able to have access to naturally through an amplified spirit and surrounding amplified energetic atmosphere.
It seems to follow that pattern. There's a point where it was known because you could talk to the plants. Then came a time where that knowledge was within a few people's understanding, and it was occulted, and then they, with that knowledge, went on to control the earth, basically. And that seems to be where that seems to happen, where we have secret societies. What are they holding on to exactly? And it seems like ayahuasca and drugs are actually a large part of what the secret society's knowledge is. And it's kind of, and because no longer plants don't talk to us anymore, so only the people who know type of thing. And it seems like Solomon suddenly turning up and explaining it again to the people might have been a different time after the destruction event. Do you know what I mean? Where before it lines up interestingly. Anyway, we can go on forever about this. Let's take a break. I'm going to play one of your songs you've just shared with me. Do you want to give a brief backstory before I play this, and then we'll come back afterwards?
Yeah. So Paul was asking if I did music or anything, or if I had any music to share. And while I don't really promote my music, I've always had a musical inclination. You know, I like to play the keyboard and the piano, and I'll go visit retirement homes and just sit and play for them at lunchtime or something, because it's soothing, you know, if it's played in the right manner, and the right notes and tones. And I used to want to be a Christian rap artist. Like, I used to listen to Toby Mac and Flame and all these different like Christian rap artists that I really vibed with at the time. And so I had a whole album I wrote. One of the songs is the ones he's about to play. It's based on Ephesians 6:10 and putting on the whole armor of God. So it's basically a story form of that poetically.
Fantastic. Great description. If you could just mute your mic in the meantime, I'm going to do the same, and I'll play this song for the guys, and we'll come back once it's done.
I'm going to use the restroom, and I'll be right back. Shot to the chest, the soldier hopes it's just a flesh wound. If he puts some pressure on it, he tries to breathe, but his breath was stolen. He's choking on all of the blood that he soaked in, slowly dying, his eyes are closing. He grabs at the flak jacket and throws it. It was supposed to protect him from those explosions, but the bullet hit him like a brick from Stonehenge. He flashes back to the frozen chosen, where his comrades died in the snow. They dozed, and even though it was cold, his lieutenant had told him, wherever the heart is, that's where the home is. He's so big, you can't help but notice the note that's in the envelope he's holding. He's holding on to something strong and golden. He opened at the fold, and this is what the note said. I'm saying this prayer, God, you're all that I've got. I want you to be there, Lord, but Satan is not. And I will cleverly remember what the devil forgot. What I'm saying is I'm praying to be a soldier for God. I'm saying this prayer, God, you're all that I've got. I want you to be there, Lord, where Satan is not. And I will cleverly remember what the devil forgot. What I'm saying is I'm praying to be a soldier for God. An invisible line drawn over and over, head to stomach, shoulder to shoulder. The gun disappears, but not before a double-edged sword appears before him. He picks up the sword and slashes forward, running faster and faster past the boa. He never looks back, cause the past can slow ya if you take your eyes off of what you run towards. The bullets are flying right past him, sort of like fiery darts. They might try to resort to entice him to try to fight violence with war, but a house that's divided can't stand no more. He never switches, he knows his mission is important, to stand and hold your position. Those were his orders. He can and will with the shield and the sword. Wisdom or weapons, which does he have more of? I'm saying this prayer, God, you're all that I've got. I want you to be there, Lord, where Satan has not. And I will cleverly remember what the devil forgot. What I'm saying is I'm praying to be a soldier for God. I'm saying this prayer, God, you're all that I've got. I want you to be there, Lord, where Satan is not. And I will cleverly remember what the devil forgot. What I'm saying is I'm praying to be be a soldier for God. The battle raged on, but the war was over. The soldiers stayed on, recruited the new soldiers. As for me, believe me, I speak boldly to make known the mysteries of these stories. As an ambassador in chains, I'm holding on to these passages to pass them on. And if you happen to seek these rewards, then be we, cause we need to repeat the chorus. I'm saying this prayer, God, you're all that I've got. I want you to be there, Lord, where Satan has not. And I will cleverly remember what the devil forgot. What I'm saying is I'm praying to be a soldier for God. I'm saying this prayer, God, you're all that I've got. I want you to be there, Lord, where Satan has not. And I will cleverly remember what the devil forgot. What I'm saying is I'm praying to be a soldier for God.
Oh, wasn't that great? I really enjoyed that. That was good. That was funky. I'll leave the link to this in the description after the show, guys. I'll once I'm done, I will quickly flip this back. I think Jay's with me there. Can you hear me, Jay? Are you still there?
Yes.
Good stuff. Fantastic. That was funky. I like that. That was good. That was really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you liked it.
I think people in the chat really enjoyed it as well. They want to know. Someone wants to know if they can copy it. I don't know if you're allowing that. I don't. That's
I don't care about the music. Like, people can
do what they want with it.
or
Okay,
whatever.
good stuff. Yeah, so I'll leave the link to that clip that you sent me there in the description so that people can listen to it again. But that was funky. People are rolling in. It seems like they really enjoy it. So we're back anyway. Plenty more to go on here, plenty more to say. I do have maybe about 20 minutes because I do have to talk to somebody else in about half an hour's time for my other channel. And that's something people can look forward to soon, about the art and the occult within artwork and that type of thing. But back to this, we want to talk about the flood. So what have you got for me?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the theory that I have is very simple. I wanted to know where the water came from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Modern academics puts forth the slushy snowball comet bombarding the Earth theory that the water comets smashed into the Earth all at once and just provided, ice that melted into the oceans or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't explain a lot to me. I don't, that's not my cosmology. I can't see that happening. But we have two different elements within the plasma apocalypse cycle. Hold on one second. I ran upstairs. I need to catch my breath.
It's all right. It's okay. Yeah, fine. Take your time. Take a breath.
Those elements are the same two elements that make up water. If, in fact, the geoplasmas that erupt from the Earth provide a great oxidation event, as we have seen in times past, that led to things like the megafauna and flora of the ancient world, gigantism, and humans, and that erupts from the Earth and fills and refreshes the Earth with a new supply of nitrogen and oxygen. And we have those fountains of the deep erupting for an entire millennia, filling our atmosphere with a fresh supply of oxygen, rising up and up into the highest reaches of the heavens. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Some of that oxygen levels out, stays down here as it comes down to the surface where we live. But like I said, these beams of plasma and energy go all the way up towards the dome itself. Okay, and the waters above actually become removed. I think there's waters above up there too, like a whole ocean basically up there in the highest heavens before you actually get to the dome. But the plasma goes all the way up, very high up into the atmosphere, and floods that area, which it stays up there because of how the electromagnetics work. And density and all these other things, buoyancy, the oxygen stays up there. Then all we need is an introduction of hydrogen. So if it's true that the firmament rips open and that there is the plasmasphere around us, which academics says is made of ionized hydrogen, and that hydrogen powerfully comes in, it will have to rush through all of that layer of oxygen that is built up during the millennia, and therefore create water.
Mm-hmm.
That will just drop right back down in buckets during the next apocalyptic cycle. Not to mention the water that rises up, like I said before, from the pressure release and all the water rising up through the surface and whatnot. But that helps to explain, quite simply for me, where all of the waters from above came from that dropped down to create the oceans that we have today and flood the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me, the ocean, which there's only one, is the flood. That's the biggest evidence of all. You know, people are like, well, in this ancient writings, and if you look, you can see that they all this and that. That's besides the point. The world is flooded now. It's a
Hmm.
water world. It's 75% water, they say. It's still here. Look around. Where did that water come from? And biblically speaking, in Revelation, it says that the seas will be removed, that there'll be no more.
Hmm.
Something happens where the earth, um, if you do an etymology study on the Greek, it doesn't say a new earth appears, but a renewed earth. That the
Hmm.
earth itself is reconstructed or renewed or changed in some
Hmm.
way, but it's still the same earth. And at least that's my perspective so far,
Well, that's
based on my studies.
I like that because it kind of demystifies the processes behind God's flood, and it gives a mechanical explanation to how it functionally actually happened. And that's why I like what you're talking about here. It's chemical in nature. It was a chemical
Yes.
reaction, and it happens. And I like that perspective. Like the flood did happen because the ocean is everywhere. That it wasn't there once is what basically
Right.
a lot of ancient
Yes.
civilizations describe it like there's no oceans.
Yes.
It only
And
Go ahead.
that also helps me to understand like the camp of the saints idea of being at the North Pole and being that circular region as shown on many medieval maps of circular land cross-sectioned by four rivers at the North Pole. If that's the camp of the saints, if that's the original Jerusalem or city of peace or peaceful city, we'll say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, then the story of the Israelites walking around it lost in the desert now makes sense because there was no Arctic Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
that the Arctic was gone at some point in the past
Mm-hmm.
because it had been removed, just as it will be removed once more in the future, revealing all of these lands.
Mm-hmm.
Atlantis rises again, the Phantom Lands are revealed once more, and the things that are revealed will be hidden and exposed.
Well, we know there are whole civilizations that are constantly being found under the water. And it's they have this whole tectonic plates, shifting lands, sinking and rising tides or something. It's kind of like, I don't feel like these are good enough explanations to explain how entire cities are underwater, to be honest. I really don't. They're just banking on us saying, oh, well, that sounds good enough. And just moving on.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's imagine if all that disappeared, what we'd find. And another thing, which I think links to your theory quite well, is the ocean is full of monsters. And I mean, the creatures in the ocean are alien compared to the rest of life on land and what we know. They are so are insects, to be honest. Like, they're unlike so much that we have, like especially mammalian forms. But what's in the ocean are wild, like a jellyfish. Your logo right there, a jellyfish.
Oh, yeah.
This thing is insane looking and it glows. It's bioluminescent in a way. It's got its own energy. It's other odd creatures. And when you get to the depths of the deepest oceans, the creatures that are there, like anglerfishes, are like
Yeah.
terrifying, terrifying
Yes.
to behold. And if what you're saying is
Yes.
true, these are creatures from the upper ionosphere atmosphere, all the way at the top in those oceans where they had a completely different, literally aliens from space from our perspective.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Right.
if the flood happened, these things just came down. And now we have oceans filled with phantazoids, as you would call them, monsters from the
Yes.
ionosphere, which are now here on
Giants.
Earth with us.
Oftentimes gigantic in nature,
Mhm.
monstrous in some cases, beautiful in others. So even
Mhm.
like within the esoteric backstory of Scientology, I've from what I've read, I've learned that there are those within that circle that believe that like dolphins are basically aliens, that they came from space or whatever. It sounds very fantastic on the surface when you first hear it, but I can reconcile that there are these otherworldly beings that look like they're rubbery in nature, maybe having to do with the electrical fields or whatnot. And I mean, there's obviously electric eels and things of that nature too.
Mhm.
Um, but they're mammals. They're not fish. They're otherworldly, the creatures, whales, and they seem to be very intelligent, extremely intelligent,
Mhm.
and they're alien to us. But when you go down into the depths of the ocean, like you said, these are sea monsters, like in the ancient world, and they drew them on maps as being sea monsters that were known to be in this particular area.
Mhm.
And over time, they receded, they hid, they found homes that were far away from places where the humans couldn't, get them. Like I feel like I talk about Phantazoid hunters and how nobility, tried to clear out the land from various monsters and uh, great beasts of old. You know what I mean? Like there's that movie that spins off of J.K. Rowling's story, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I feel like there's a lot of truth to that that we have forgotten that great beasts, fantastic beasts existed, and they occasionally do flood into this world. But that's the flood. I feel like there is a sensible explanation to it, just as I do there is the vapor canopy. And the ancient stories indicate that there was safe places from this, that there was this sort of Garden of Eden place where there was eternal life. And
Hmm.
eternal meaning, at least, at the very least, extended life, far more than just what we have at this short, tiny little lifespans as children in the modern age, comparatively speaking,
Hmm.
where people, like Noah types, like Zeusudra and other types of Noahs in ancient history, went into the hollow recesses of the world, into the earth, traveled for days through darkness in order to retrieve some sort of mythic plant or substance or whatnot to extend their very own lives.
Hmm.
And met these people who were survivors of the cataclysm. Or, Noah. It wasn't Noah that went on this journey, but people went and found Noah or this Noah type or survivors essentially, which is interesting because in the ancient Proto-Indo-European language, there's a word nem, N-E-M, and then there's an O. If you add an O to that, it's just a connector, which means of the. Nem means the allotted or the leftover, and therefore survivors. So of the survivors is Nemo, and there's a lot of Nemo symbolism if you start paying attention. Or Nim, all by itself, like The Secret of Nim. There's a sweet movie called The Secret of Nim.
Which is Omen backwards.
Yes, that's exactly why I did that too.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that robot at the end of my credits,
Yeah.
his name's Nemo.
Yeah, that's interesting. Etymology is a fascinating one when you really get into it as well. That's a whole other can of worms. I really don't think we have any time for, to be honest, because I've been going for almost 2 hours here, so we're coming to the end of the show. And I think, like I said, I think maybe we could do another 2 hours if we get the time to do this. But your work is fascinating. There's no other way to put it. Like, it inspires thought, and your passion is inspiring as well. And I'm happy you're out there doing what you're doing. If you want to tell people where they can find you, I believe you have a book available as well. I have linked that in the description of this video, and your your PayPal is also linked in this as well if people want to support you financially. And your website is also linked, and so is your YouTube. Is there anything else you think people might want to know about your work, or where they can find more info, anything coming on the horizon to keep an eye out for? And we'll close this show out.
Yes, thank you. Well, aside from just YouTube and the Plasma Apocalypse and our Ancient Oblivion and other topics on my YouTube channel, I do have my website where I've got different types of merch. So, like you pointed out, my books. This is Ancient Oblivion, the Plasma Apocalypse. And then I've got Return to Hyperborea. This is my newest book that I have just sort of focused on the Garden of Eden and Hyperborea and that land at the North Pole. And there's also merch and stuff. So I print out like little mini posters of things, little maps and merch. And this is like Mount Meru and the blue beam shooting up into the sky and stuff. Stickers, all kinds of different things that people can purchase. However, that's just, that helps to support me financially. The website itself also does. And um, it's it's like a museum of fringe esoteric ideas, all the things that we've been discussing. And I developed my website and I've been working on it a lot lately too to update it specifically to be an interactive museum on the internet of all things that I'm interested in that are fringe and conspiracy oriented and stuff. It's very fun. There's audio examples all over the place, visuals, stories, videos that you can watch. There's a connection between that and my YouTube stuff. My books are on there as well. And if you look closely, there's even some hidden uh puzzles, I'll say.
Oh,
Fun, yes, fun little side quest type things that those who are paying attention can
cryptic.
follow and
I like it.
go on a little labyrinth journey or
There we go,
whatnot.
guys. You want to kill a bit of time, go on a labyrinth journey and find some hidden truths. Go and check out J Dreamer's website. Again, link is down below. I think it's just jdreamers.com, isn't it? I think it's quite Easy to remember. Yeah, quite simple. There you go, guys. Go support him. Go subscribe to his channel. He's been in the game for, like I said, over a decade. He's carved out his own theory and idea, and it's growing stronger and stronger with each passing year with more evidence to back it up. And I think it supplements our work in Little Season very well. And I think there's definitely crossover and things we can learn from each other in this community. And I'm glad you're here to do this with me. Thanks for doing it. We'll definitely do it again sometime.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
No problem. If you want to just stick around to speak your mic, you can do. We'll talk after this. I'm just going to close out the show with a few announcements. So, guys, I have 4 books left of the Nephilim Look Like Clowns, which are just kind of taking up a lot of space on my desk here. And if you want to get yourself a signed copy of these, just email me at understandingconspiracy@gmail.com. Just a quick announcement there for that. Also, when it comes to my patrons, I have just uploaded a new members only live stream onto Patreon now, which was streamed last night on YouTube. I did look into it because people have requested it. I can't simultaneously stream on Patreon and YouTube at the same time. It doesn't work like that when you're doing a members-only stream. If I gave you the link to it from Patreon, you still wouldn't get access because you're not a member on YouTube. I can't cross over like that. But it always is uploaded straight to Patreon after it's been on YouTube, as soon as YouTube allows me to re-download it onto my own desktop. So that is up there now. It's available. It was a fun talk about art, and we got into some extra things there. It's a bit spicier usually than the shows I do. The language is a little bit more intense, let's say, and it's a bit more personal, and the conversation's a little bit more, again, tied together with a small group of people, because it is obviously members on the live show. So if you haven't listened already, become a member on YouTube, go and listen to it, or go over to Patreon if you're already signed up there. There has been an update to Patreon. I've now updated the price of the minimum access tier. With inflation and everything else that it is, $5. It's when it comes to conversion, it's something like $2 for me. It's actually not a lot of money anymore like it used to be. I have upgraded it to $7.50 now to become a minimum access member on Patreon. But all of you who are already a $5 member, your price stays the same month on month. There's no change to your price whatsoever. It's a legacy pricing. So as long as you stay a member, your price will always be $5. But that just an update, being transparent, that has happened on Patreon recently. But there is also a 7-day free trial on Patreon now for free members who want to just check it out and see what it has to offer. There's a lot of extra content on there you will not find anywhere else. I have lots of interviews lined up for the new channel, Understanding Creativity. I'm going to go do one straight after this right now. I have someone from Australia who's a lecturer on fine art and art history who's going to give me a presentation on the occult within classical artworks. And that's going to be all going on that channel very soon, once I obviously add some images, spruce it up a little bit, get the audio level sorted. So you have that to look forward to as well. But the raw, unedited versions of these talks I'm going to be doing for Understanding Creativity, it'll be about a week before they get released to the public. Early access will be going to Patreon. So there is that for you guys as well, coming there very soon. Just wanted to let you know. Just a quick update. Again, email me at understandingconspiracy@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with me and share anything with me at all, or perhaps want to contribute to the new channel and maybe have a tale to tell within the art industry. Please let me know. And again, make sure to go and subscribe to Jay Dreamer's channel. He was a wonderful guest, very gracious. I'm thankful to have him on and share his wild fringe theory. And as somebody who has my own wild fringe theory, I very much empathize with him and his journey and everything about it. So there we go, guys. That's the show. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon with more. And as always, God bless.